Vice Mayor Schaefer,
Here.
Vice Chairman Jones,
Here.
Chairman DeGenova.
Here.
Yeah, I'm gonna sign that.
Jason, read the management comments. What is that?
It's on the last page.
Okay.
Okay, I've got this one too, yeah.
I see.
We're passing a thing around to sign in because I believe the auditor needs that. Okay. We'll go on to item 2 as we're doing that approval of the motion summaries of the meeting on March the 7th and May the 23rd. In your packet, you might have received 2 of them on March the 7th, and Elaine and Michelle put the new one in for May the 23rd at your seat. So you should have a copy of that also. You want to take a minute and look at that?
Sign again saying allow us to edit
This prior to. After reviewing it, is there any corrections or deletions, or entertain a motion then?
Motion to approve as submitted.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Jones, second by Kent. Would you read the roll, please?
Vice Mayor Schaefer,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Jones,
Yes.
Chairman DeGenova.
Yes. Review of the audit. Dean, are you gonna?
Yeah, I'll
our name
introduce,
to the other 2 gentlemen? I don't know, you might not know, you might know.
I'll introduce Jason Carr. He's the partner with Wilson, Shannon, and Snow, the audit CPA firm that's performed the city's audit for the last several years. So Jason's got quite a background here with the city. He's going to go through, I think he handed out the audit reports, and he'll walk through and kind of explain what that is and give you the results of our 2015 audit.
Thank you, Dean. My name is Jason Carr. As Dean said, I'm the audit partner for the city's audit for 2015. I'm with the firm Shannon and Snow. We had submitted the audit by the required deadline of June 30, 2016, and the audit has been certified by the clerk of the bureau. So it is public record as of probably sometime, I think the middle of July. So what I would like to do is just briefly and quickly go through what I have presented before you. If I talk too fast or if anybody has any questions, just feel free to interrupt me. If you look at the first letter that's dated August 29, 2016, which is addressed to council and management, the purpose of this letter is just to communicate our responsibilities for the audit. Our audit requirements were communicated in an engagement letter that was signed by Dean on April 18, 2016. Under the significant audit findings section, dealing with accounting principles, There was a significant accounting principle that was adopted in 2015 by the city and was required by all 12/31/15 governments related to GASB 68, which summarizes is now that before this accounting principle, information regarding pension and the liability was always disclosed in the notes, indicating only what contributions the city had made. Based on this new accounting principle, the proportionate share of Ohio police and fire pension and also OPERS is now required to be recorded in the city's financial statements. By doing so, this caused there to be a restatement to beginning equity, so to speak. And on that first page in the box, you will see what the impact had to the city's bottom line by implementing this new GASB. These negatives are very common for a city of this size and are essentially just attributed to adopting the accounting principle. This had no impact on cash. Working and just knowing about how Moody's does bond ratings, S&P, this is kind of factored into that, so it really doesn't even affect your bond rating or anything of that nature as well. So there will be another accounting principle in the near future, probably about 2 or 3 years, next dealing with the accounting for healthcare benefits and recording a proportionate share of healthcare benefits in government's financial statements as well. That probably won't be until about 2018. So.
And when I first looked at that, I saw the bracket and I thought, well, are they negative or are they just in brackets?
No, those are negatives.
I'm glad you did
Yeah.
show,
And you can read in the comprehensive annual financial report, which is what the city releases every year. I believe it's in note 2, or it'll give you more information on adoption and how that impacted the bottom line. So,
If you recall, there's been a lot of discussion over the years at the state level about the public pension systems, police and fire, PRS, and I think state teachers' retirement, state employees, and whether they're adequately funded. They're not really talking about current liability per se or any recognized. They're looking at future funding, whether they'll be able to pay out all the benefits accruing to the people that are participating in the systems. And there was great less filling about whether it should be a 30-year period, what should be used for some of the projections as far as expected rate of returns and any number of other related matters. Got to be a bigger issue a few years ago when the stock markets kind of tumbled down quite a bit, and a lot of the pension systems, like everybody else, had they were used to projecting 10, 12, 13% rate of returns on how they invested these funds. They had a few years where they didn't obviously earn that. And so there's been a lot of back and forth, state legislature, what kind of actuarial numbers are being used to determine these liability or the adequacy of funding. There's been some changes. The police and fire system, which Kent is a retiree of, didn't impact him directly, but our police and firefighters are members of the police and fire pension system, and they've had a series of increases in contributions. I think taking what they used to contribute 10% of their earnable salary, and now it's going to ultimately be up to 14% once it's fully implemented. And I think that's somewhat at the gist of where, at least from my standpoint, of these liabilities that are now being required to, as Jason said, be reported in our financial statements as opposed to a note, in the sense that what happens down the road if we have other financial issues occurring out there that cause the need for more contributions or whatever to be generated. Politically, there's means to address that, and more than likely, it's going to be a cost borne by the members of the system as opposed to the public entities. So the notion of whether someone's version of an unfunded portion of future liabilities is actually, on Delaware's part, totals close to $30 million or whatever it is. And that's just our proportionate share statewide. Who may pay that or how may that be funded? And there's nothing out there that says any public entity is going to have to pick up more than likely. I'm almost 99.999% sure that either benefits will be reduced or contributions on an employer part will be increased to address that, assuming that it materializes. But ultimately, in the accounting, the standards boards and whatever else, this isn't unique to Ohio. There's a lot of other states that are much worse shape. At least in Ohio, we've funded our pensions as we've gone along, including the state. There's other places where they weren't, you know, they were withholding contributions but just not putting them into the pension system. You know, it was deemed that we do need to book these now as financial statement amounts. As Jason indicated, yes, if someone were just looking at our financial statements in general prior to this and then after that, it was a pretty big liability that's now showing up. $30 million, $28 million isn't inconsequential to the city. Who looks at our financial statements? Rating agencies generally, more often than not, if anybody does, at least to rely on them. There may be a few other people out there. And again, as Jason said, they've kind of taken this into account, even though in essence, we've recognized a very large liability. It's not like we turned around, raised or lowered our bond ratings. They did question it quite extensively. And you know, who knows, they may be at some point down the road. But anyways, that's just a little bit more background information on that.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Page 2, quickly just going through this. The accounting estimates used by management to prepare the financial statements were consistent and allowable when compared to prior years, and also following accounting standards. No difficulties in performing the audit. We had no audit adjustments based on our audit, nor did we have any unadjusted differences that may have resulted. There was no disagreements with management. Management had provided the representation letter to us indicating that all information provided to us that was requested, that was signed on June 13, 2016. There was no consultation with other accountants. We did not provide any other services to the City of Delaware besides the audits, and there was nothing that would have impaired our professional relationship with the city. So if you go to the federal schedule, which is on page 4 of this document, it's titled the Schedule of Expenditures of Federal Awards. The city is required to follow the requirements of Uniform Guidance, Single Audit Act. They changed the threshold from $500,000 to $750,000 for total federal expenditures. And then since the city spent $967,000, $287 for 2015, the city is required to have a single audit. For 2015's audit, we audited the Highway Planning and Construction Grant, CFDA 20.205. I worked extensively with the engineering department, part of this grant, and they had information, was very organized. People were very helpful, and we did not have any issues based on that audit of the program. So if you turn to the next page, page 5.
Real quick, Jason, I'm gonna bounce in here periodically, because I know we've got a couple of new council members that haven't kind of gone through this, but that single requirements, we receive more than the threshold amount of federal grant money, we're required to have additional audit procedures. Testing not just our compliance with federal, state, and local laws, which occurs anyways, but our compliance with these grant agreements. It's the way the federal government, when they pass through money either through the state or directly to the city, of checking to make sure that we're adhering to all the strings they attach to the grants that they provide for us. And there's a pretty prescriptive process that they must go through. We have to list out what our actual federal grant awards are, and that's what that page that Jason just referred to. And then there's a series of reports and some disclosure information that needs to go along with that. This ultimately is then filed with a clearinghouse, federal clearinghouse, so that each and every entity, federal entity that provides funding to the city has access to this. If there were, and there have been a few issues in the past, and we get questions too sometimes from depending on whatever agency it is, and they may follow up on some issues. The issue may not be a financial issue, it may be that we didn't properly ensure that a contractor was paying federal prevailing wage rates or complying with Davis-Bacon Act type of things. It's more of a compliance type of issue than anything. But I think, as Jason indicated, I don't think anything came up this year in the course of that. And he'll explain that here in a little bit.
Was this total expenditures, $967,000, is that high, Dean? Has it ever been that much before?
We've not been at that level. A lot of it, you know, you can see what the transportation amounts were, mostly with US 23, Pennsylvania, I think. And, typically we're getting some of the FAA money in years past. Technically, if we drop, what's the threshold, Jason?
$750,000.
It used to be 300, 350 a year, but if we drop below that, arguably we could conceivably go a year or two or whatever without having to have the additional audit work performed. And that's probably come up in the past, but if we ever go over that threshold, sometimes we have to go back and review things. So we've always had the single audit work as a part of our contract, but who knows? If we get lucky here with the Point project, that could be a pretty large number moving forward.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. If the projects, if the levy passes, this thing could really blossom out to a couple $1 million.
And they distinguish between federal funds and even state
State.
funds, although a lot of times it may come from a state agency, but if underlying that it's actual federal funds, then it shows up on here.
So these are just federal funds.
Morpsey's a large source, a lot of what they do is allocate federal transportation money, so.
Very good. Continue on.
All right, on page 5 and 6 of the document, it's just the notes to the federal schedule, kind of what Dean referenced, just providing more information on some of the amounts that are in the schedule itself. If you look at page 7 of this document, basically this is actually in the supplemental audit report that is out on the Auditor State's website, and then what we provide. And it kind of gives a summary of everything or all the procedures that we've performed at a higher level. Our responsibility is to issue an opinion on the financial statements themselves, which is the first box there, and it indicates unmodified, which is the best audit opinion that the city can receive. We're also required to report in accordance with generally accepted government auditing standards, or GAGAS, which requires us to obtain an understanding, test internal controls over the city and how they process receipts, disbursements, things of that nature, as well as to basically test compliance with the Ohio Revised Code, debt covenants, determine if there's fraud, illegal acts, or anything of that nature. If there's anything at a material level, it would be reported in a schedule of findings, which you can see on page 8 of this document. But based on the boxes, you'll see there for material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, or material noncompliance. There were no material issues based on our audit, so that's why there's no's in those boxes. Another item there as well, as we kind of just talked about the highway grant, talking about the federal schedule. We're also required to issue an opinion on the federal schedule or the federal program that we test. And that's also asking the same questions there. Besides issuing that opinion, we also need to test for how the city processes controls for federal programs, how they process receipts, keep track of disbursements, Davis-Bacon Act, things of that nature. And then also test for compliance as well with the federal guidelines. And you'll see that the city was in compliance with those as well. Seeing those in the boxes, then our opinion was unmodified on the federal program. So the dollar threshold for type A programs is $750,000, and the city is considered to be a low-risk auditee, which essentially means that for next year's audits, the auditors will be required to have 20% coverage over the federal schedule that you saw before. We're not required to test every single program that the city receives federal money-wise. We're required to get a percentage of coverage. So depending upon whether or not you're a low-risk auditee or not impacts how many programs we have to test to get the sufficient number, the amount of coverage. And then on page 8, you'll see that there was no findings related to GAGAS and then also for federal awards, and that's why that's blank. Page 9, I apologize, this is not supposed to be in there. I should have checked this before my administrative person said I was good to go, so that's my fault. Anyway, any questions so far on just the brief letters that we talked about?
Chris, and do you understand the federal, the one on page, I guess it was 6, 7. All right. Also, the last thing we'll discuss is the management letter. The management letter is considered to be items that are comments or recommendations that we may
suggest to management that they would like to correct. They're not considered to be material in nature, and that's why they're in a separate document called the management letter. The management letter is considered to be public record, but unlike the other documents or letters that we just spoke about, those are posted on the Auditor of State's website. The management letter is public record, but it has to go through a formal, well, just like any other public record that may request, to actually request this from management. So it's not posted on the Auditor of State's website. The first item, non-compliant citation. This is consistent with prior years and deals with certifying expenditures when that expense may be greater than $250. Currently, the process is not to have a formalized certifying expenditures less than $250. And that deals with number one, and that's been something that's been consistent with prior years. Under suggestions for improving operations on page 2, this deals with cash management and also testing with one of the CFDA 20.205 program that we had tested. What I spoke about earlier about one of our requirements is that we make sure that receipts are processed correctly and expenditures are accounted for correctly and things of that nature. When we were doing our testing and before we had received the financial statements, it had come to our attention that a reimbursement was incorrectly put into the state highway or into one of the incorrect funds. This was identified by the city before the information was submitted to us for audit. If we had caught this information, it would have been an audit adjustment and it would have been a material issue and it would have been a finding and reported differently than what it is now. So, but since management did catch it, the item is just being reported in the management letter as insignificant in nature, with the recommendation that that just procedures or just continual monitoring exist to make sure that when there is federal expenditures that do occur, that the matching receipts that accompanies that expenditure is put into the right fund. So that's essentially what that's talking about.
Any comment on that, Dean?
Well, it was really more of how we posted the receipt. If you recall, when we do our capital improvement plan, we have multiple funds, especially for road work, that monies come out of. We use our license fee fund, our state highway improvement fund, our just general CIP fund. I believe this was related, if it was federal money, it was probably related to 23 Pennsylvania.
The right-of-ways, the 5 right-of-ways that we purchased
For 23 in
Pennsylvania.
So there was a federal project flowing through Morpsey. So when I do this every year, and we try to put our capital plan to look at which fund we budget. So that, we may be spending $500,000 that we think will occur, and $400,000 of it may come from a grant fund. The other $100,000 is the city match. Normally, the way I do this is when we budget, I put all the city money comes out of these. Could be the state highway improvement fund because it's on a state highway, and so I can use those monies for that. So I use that to cover the city's match. Well, as these things spread over from one year to the next, and when we get the reimbursements and whatnot, normally anything that's grant related. So if I expect to get a $400,000 grant, I'll put that in the general CIP, and I'll show it as an expenditure, and all the grant reimbursements will come there. Well, because of the timing of this, some of the expenditures that were reimbursed ultimately from Morpsey got charged to the State Highway Improvement Fund, and then when the reimbursement came in, it went into the general CIP fund. It's half a dozen of one, 6 of another. It's not like we couldn't do it that way, but as Jason noted, when the reimbursements are received, that portion of it probably should have gone in the State Highway Improvement Fund. It really was a function of not so much how the budget was laid out, but how the actual expenditures came in from engineering and where the reimbursements, because typically we deposit all the grant reimbursements in this general CIP fund. But part of the grant eligible expense came out of the State Highway Improvement Fund.
Okay.
That probably made it more complicated, but it was really just how it was recorded. And I don't know when it came up that we
I was going to say,
determined.
that was my next question. Was it prior to the audit, probably the first quarter of the year,
But after we closed.
after
so
you
we
closed the
couldn't
year,
fix
so you could
Yeah.
make that
it. We had to
change.
fix it in 2016.
Normally that gets to be one of the challenges. It's always a little bit difficult. Rob handles a lot of our grant follow-up, at least at the finance, most of these things centralized departments are handling, whether issue 2. In fact, I gave him the next grant agreement for the next FAA grant. Sometimes, we've got several different funds where those monies can come out of, and then it changes midway through. Trying to match them up and get them into the right fund from a budget purpose, and also keeping track to make sure we're getting the proper grant funds reimbursed. Sometimes that can come up. If you recall, we generally receive money from the FAA from two different pots of money. One is an allocation amount. We're allocated about $150,000 a year. We have a separate fund for that. We also apply for discretionary FAA money, which means we don't know whether we're going to get it. The grant that we talked about today was, I think, mostly discretionary. But when they line these things up, they wheel and deal behind the scenes, even the people at FAA, and they'll use some of our discretionary money, and the rest of it's going to be, or some of our allocation money, the rest of it's going to be discretionary. And they set it up that way initially, but then a year or so later, somebody at FAA says, no, I think we'd be better off if we use, because we got some money from somebody else that they didn't use, so let's use all discretionary money. So it's a challenge, and like I said, I've assigned Rob, he tries to keep track of that and make sure it gets into it matches up what we budget. But invariably, and since some of that's federal money, if you look back over the years when there's any issue that pops up in this single audit report, it's something like that. It's not like we improperly expended the money. It's not like we don't know how to account for it, but keeping everybody on the same page with things that change and it's just something that's going to occur. So we try to stay on top of it as best we can. The one thing that Jason did indicate about, had we not audited, and I think I shared this with the Finance Committee a couple years ago, these notions about what independent auditors coming in, what we can do with our audit adjustments, and sometimes the threshold is some degree of materiality. In this case, I think it was $83,000. That's determined to be a material amount. Then it goes into this whole different category, whereas with what he just said, it becomes a material weakness or whatever else, even though at the end of the day, if you get down to the nitty gritty of what it was, it's not that, something got crossed somewhere, but it's not like the bigger picture issues about spending the grant money or keeping track of what's coming in and going out really weren't at play, but it's the way it is.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Jason, you done?
Two more real quick. Item number 2 in the management letter. The federal government changed, or they updated from OMB circular verbiage to now what's called uniform guidance verbiage. And one of the requirements is that they now want to see written policies governing the administration of federal programs. The recommendation deals with, although the city has policies, they may not specifically address those areas. So in order to avoid future issues with future auditors in the future, it's a future 4 times, it's recommended that policies are developed, approved, go through that process. So, and then item number 3, when we were just testing the balance sheet this year, we saw a variance of $5,000 in reconciling customer deposits to ledgers. The recommendation there in number 3 is just to resolve that issue. So, and that's essentially the manager letter and our recommendations for the 2015 audit. So.
Looks real good. And Rob and Dean, I compliment you and your staff on doing an outstanding job. And Jason, it's under my understanding, and you're not going to be able to do the audit next year?
That is correct. You will have the auditor state of Ohio, I believe, next year. So I would just like to say that in some way, shape, or form, whether the firm I'm with at now or the one I was at prior, I probably worked on the city for probably 15 years. It seems like it's been a long time. I'd just like to say that having dealt with a lot of the people here at the city of Delaware, you have a very professional staff. Everybody's very helpful to get information. And there is that underlying principle of just wanting to do the right thing. So I would just like to add that to the group up here that audits are not always fun, but it's working with the people here at Delaware has always been something to look forward to. So
I know I've been on council for 25 years, and I think I've been on the finance committee for 22 of those years and chaired it on and off. And it's been a privilege working with your firm.
thank you.
And I know Dave Yossi, he sent me an email and said that he was really proud of the city of Delaware and the audit and how it came out. So I know it's your job to make sure we do our job. And good luck in the future for, hopefully our paths will cross maybe a couple, 3 years from now.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Or these gentlemen might be on, but I don't.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I've shared that with staff too, Jason, I think does a real good job, and it's been pretty seamless process for us for quite some time. We have had, I think there was a break there at some point in time, we had stated that came in and did the audit, but next year, and I've shared that with our department heads, Jason's pretty good when he sits down and we go over these things. They have an audit compliance thing that he has to go through and check, and he knows a lot of things, even though it says this in revised code. At the end of the day, what practical impact does it have? So he's pretty understanding when it comes to coming up with these sort of things, and so we have a lot of discussion. But they're going to review his work, and if he wants to continue to do public audits, he's going to need to make sure he stays on top of things. I'm not sure next year with the state auditors, it might be a little bit more, this, that, and whatever else. So you may see a few more things, notations. It'd be interesting to see how that all plays out. But that's okay too. So
We'll be prepared for it. Thank you,
All
sir.
right, thank you very much.
You gentlemen have any questions?
one of the things that ultimately may come out is at least as we know right now, because again, the state auditor has the responsibility under state law to audit all public agencies and entities. And they have a provision that allows them to farm that out to firms like Jason's and others that do this. And typically we've had independent CPA firms perform our audits. It's just they're a lot more expedient and efficient and come in and do a really, really good job. Seems to work pretty well. That's not automatic. It's not our call whether that occurs or not. It is the state auditors, and typically they base it on, if they don't see us as being a high risk or problematic type of audit, they'll allow that. They did indicate that they've got a policy now that after 10 or 15 years of having external auditors, they want to come in and do it for at least a year, and to at least keep current with that. At this point, that's what I think is probably going to occur with the 2016 audit. Whether then we'll go back out and when we do that, we would then go through a selection process that the state auditor would also be a part of. It'd actually be them selecting, but they do reach out and ask for our input as far as who might perform those services. So that's probably more than likely the way it'll play out.
But it's my understanding that the state's going to do it next year.
Right, they are going to, and it's not just here because there's any issues. I think they've reached out to some entities like us that have had independent auditors for years and years.
Mhm.
They're, I think, getting in, and I think it's probably not a bad thing,
No.
getting in a process to at
It's
least
good.
once every 10 years or so, bring it back in-house to the state auditor, so they'll have their people come out and perform the audit work and do the audit next year. Right now, they just review the work that the independent does. And so they'll actually do the field work, and they'll come in and issue the reports. There'll be somebody from the state auditor's office that'll be here next year.
Okay. One thing we're going to have to probably make sure we're doing correctly is the money we're going to receive in from Taggart and
Simon Tank.
Simon Taggart and that entity, make sure that's all posted correctly.
Those are actually separate audits, those entities. We now have our new community authorities. There's 2 separate audits, and then the JED will have an audit done on that also. They'll audit the books of the JED. The money that the city receives as our proportionate share then becomes
They being
a
the state,
revenue on our part. Please.
they being the state
The
law.
state will do that next year too.
Mhm.
So,
Make sure we have all our Ts crossed and Is dotted on that.
correct.
Great job, Rob. Thank you. Have you gentlemen probably know Rob?
And if I can add, Dean, Jason informed me that some JEDs in Ohio have never been audited,
Hmm.
just because there's not a whole lot of transactions and whatnot,
Mhm.
so.
Well, we struggled for years. We put those new community authorities in place 7, 8 years ago or more. I think it was 2009 before we started getting NCA revenue coming in. And we were back and forth with the state they weren't sure how to handle that ultimately. And eventually they came around. I think we've had 2 years now that have been audited. or we prepare financial statements separate, even though it's, that's not the city. Those new community authorities are separate political entities unto their own, but we do it on behalf of them, and we do all the legwork. And but it is audited, and likewise for the JED. We haven't had an audit yet for the JED. We just had a 2016 is the first time we've had any real money coming in and going out. So
How much?
we did actually bring information because we just had a JED board meeting last week.
I was looking here, I thought maybe it might have been on the financial report.
It's so far, and this is from most of this, the taxes collected were from contractors working out there to build it. The facility opened up, June 20 something,
25th, yeah.
but so those storefronts started withholding probably in July, and that's not due until the end of August or August 15th. So we're just starting to get in some of that withholding from the actual stores being open. But most of this is representative of the construction work that was done out there, and the total taxes collected was $63,727. It's about a number of about $350,000 that somebody projected would be collected, and I knew right away. I said that ain't going to happen. That was even before the state changed with House Bill 5 and said that they had this casual entry law. It's tough to run down those contractors. We were out there quite a bit and did, I think, the best we could do. But with the recent legislation that changed, that was effective January 1st of 2016, contractors only have to withhold, even not just for things like this JED, but even the city, if their employees are working for 20 consecutive days in that city. Sometimes they're bouncing people all around, and you have no way of, unless you're sitting, keeping you the money. So the vast majority of the contractors working out there, and a lot of them, they weren't, all the people that came in and finished off all those, like their whole job was only going to take them 6 days. They didn't need to, so they're not getting any withholding from those subs. And so it was a primary general contract. And we worked with the Tanger people, and I think Cleveland Contracting was the prime. And again, we were able to collect $63,000. I think the Berkshire Township people were looking at these big projections. I've seen them all before.
We
It ain't
talked
gonna
about
happen
that.
that
We
way,
didn't think
but
that was gonna happen.
we'll see once how accurate their numbers are, because they relied on one. All the previous said, well, there will be a $50 million a year in payroll, and then did the math, but even that I think needs to be discounted. That's a lot of people talking the big numbers. And who was it I was talking to? John Hunter, with one of our people downstairs, actually works on the weekends at one of the stores, one of the kitchen places out there or whatever. I was surprised they only had like 5 or 6 employees. They're real thin when it comes to staffing those things. John's interacted with, and we tried, we sent a couple of tax ladies over there too, to just find out who these entities are that are operating these stores. Because you might think, well, it says XYZ side, but who knows who's hired. Sometimes they have different entities that staff it, and it might be a temporary employment agency that brings in the people. People farm all that stuff out anywhere. It's hard to really get down to find out. And you talk to the people in there, and they're like, we don't know. They don't even know where their money comes from. It's some payroll office, who knows where. But trying to piece that all together, it's like a little bit of a jigsaw puzzle. But one of the things I think we're seeing is I don't think they're bringing in quite the number of employees. Not that they're not busy and doing whatever else, but they know how to remain profitable. They keep their payroll as low as they can get it. I was surprised at how few employees they actually have.
We'll know a year out and what the outcome of that is.
Right. So we said it should be kicking in, and on our end, that's the JED, but on our end, we get our 40% of what's being collected, and that, what we can and can't do with that is really, if at all, if there's any strings attached, it's what was a part of when we reached entered into the agreement, and we agreed to be a part of the JED. And I think it's one thing that we've committed it to improvements on the east side of town there, whether it be the point or whatever else. Technically, though, you have to look at what we do and what we can and can't do with that. If at the bottom, it's just a general revenue, I'm not advocating at all that we wouldn't, but that would dictate how we have to account for that money coming in. Right now, it's going into our CIP fund as a separate revenue up there. Our expenses associated with that will be something we'll have to determine as a council, how we want to track that moving forward.
Yeah, that was my concern too.
Yeah, I mean, our recommendation is all along has been that the reason we did this is because we could demonstrate a relationship between the impact, the traffic at the mall and that corridor. So that's where it's going to be. The mechanics of doing that is something that.
And we're not stuck to any time elements as far as allocating that money. Like,
But we're going to have ongoing, as you know, just going through the updating our transportation program, that corridor is going to have continual needs, whether it's helping with a match for a large federal grant, or whether it's basic maintenance, or whether it's any number of different things over there. So that's where a lot of ultimately where those dollars are going to go. But there's not enough there now to do much of anything.
no.
And again, how we
Well,
like
it's,
to,
it's all set in our employee and employee.
well, it's not a person because it runs the gamut. It's John and any number of different people. It's
Well, didn't we
additional
hire
work.
someone part-time?
It help deal, but it's not a specific person that only
Okay.
works on JED stuff because they
No.
all do it. But yes, we also get, on top of our 40%, we get a 4% right off the
4%
top. And right now, it's not covering the cost, but eventually, because we put a lot of time and effort into keeping track of this and getting this all set up, but eventually over time, hopefully it becomes a little less labor intensive on our part to interact with some of these entities out there, and then it will be. The other thing related, again, this ultimately, we're kind of feel our way through, part of it will be based on, it's one thing what council prefers to do with the proceeds, because one of my big concerns all along was trying to figure out whether the nature of the fact that our this was in the city of Delaware, well, 0.7% goes to the fire EMS fund, 0.15 goes to the rec levy, and the 1% is discretionary. Does that keep that same, obviously we're not getting the full 1.85% because Berkshire Township's getting 60% of that, but I think the general legal opinion was it doesn't hold those same strings. It just becomes a different type, even though it's the same tax rate, it's a different revenue stream. So technically that 40% that comes to the city, just like the 60% that goes to Berkshire Township, I'm not sure what they're going to use it for. They may use it to staff certain positions or do whatever else. And ultimately, setting up a separate fund, we can't just create funds because we want to account for something differently. When they come in and do audits, generally if we have a revenue source that has strings attached to it, special revenue, then we can create that fund and then track that. But we'll see how this thing plays out, though. But surely we'll certainly track it on our own way through our capital improvement process and say, okay, because I know there's going to be questions about it. I'll show in there what those revenues are, and how it gets applied to the expenditures will be the other side.
Well, that's what I
So I
said.
understand what you just said. So of that 40%, we still have to divvy up the fire and the rec?
No, we
No,
don't.
no.
We don't, okay.
No, we don't.
We don't.
I just want to make sure that we've got it all straightened out for the 16 audit, because the state's going to audit us.
Right, it might get even more interesting if our levy out there passes.
Yeah.
Then their rate, so then we got a little bit more work, because now the rate goes up to 2%, including the JED rate.
Mhm.
So, and for that issue, will still be the 60, but it'll just be on a little bit higher amount.
Okay, very good. Item 4, upcoming supplemental appropriations.
Yeah, just, Chairman, I wanted to just make you aware that there are three projects, but two in particular. In my capital improvement budget, I mentioned the impact fee report that we did back in 2002. That put in place the impact fees that we currently collect for fire, for police, and for parks and
Municipal
recreation.
court, everything.
And then there's a municipal impact fee that we put in place in 2006. The last time our fees were reviewed and updated was 2006. And periodically, they should be reviewed to determine the capital projects that were associated with those fees, what's being collected, and it's my recommendation that we move ahead on that. We can use the impact fees for the cost of the report, which is estimated to be about $47,000 $100,000. I have a proposal that I can share with the committee. But this is really something that needs to be reviewed from time to time. Right now, the development community is paying this. This helps to make growth pay for itself. That's one of the reasons we put it in place, is because there's an impact that growth has on our community facilities, whether those are walking paths, or whether those are fire trucks, or whether those are police cars, any number of different things. You can only use them on capital improvements. You can't use them on maintenance or operations. So I'm going to recommend that probably at our upcoming council meeting, the first or second meeting in September, that we at least do the first reading with ordinance that would do that. But again, as I said, as we did in 2006, the current impact fees can pay for that. But it's really just good practice to update these. These will require all of the department heads to review their capital planning needs over the next several years. What are the facilities looking like in terms of the Parks Department, the Fire Department, the Police Department, and our municipal services. And they may also look at the realm of transportation, and that will probably be included as well.
Yeah, that's what I put down. Mr. Price is going to be discussing something on the conversation we had at council a couple of weeks ago, a couple of meetings ago, about the apartments.
Yeah, that's
sanitation pickup and things of that nature. Number one. Number two,
yeah,
I've heard a lot about impact fees, and what I'd like staff to do, Tom, is to see what other municipalities are charging on impact fees. I know we were one of the first ones to pioneer impact fees.
Yeah, we were.
For Central Ohio, for all those different entities. But, and I've heard a lot of rumbling out here on new construction, and Ken, I know he meets with the BIA people, and I know they're a little bit upset with how strong our impact fees are for development and what it used to be, and you obviously got Mike Shade's Bible on impact fees, and we really never did anything about that, but I just think there's a lot that we have to digest on.
Yeah, we're going to do this report. It'd probably be a good time for just a general discussion of impact fees.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think what we want to do is we want to review what we've done with the impact fees, why we put them in place, and then I think as part of the process of updating it is to get the business community to be part of that discussion, because it is, at this point, it is factored in, but we want to, as they say from time to time, you want to review these fees so they're defensible, so that you can, there's a relationship between what you're charging and what you're doing with those fees, whether it's.
We have to spend that too, don't we?
Yeah, within a
period of 5 years.
Yeah, there's a
or
spend
something.
out.
Yeah, there's a spend out, and if we don't, what happens?
Well, then you end up having
Having
to,
a refund?
yeah, and we've not been in
never
that,
have-
no,
yeah.
because we've been in the position where we've had enough capital needs, whether it's on the fire side or the police side, and municipal impact fund services are really all debt service related. It's really parks and the.
Well, how are we going to handle Mr. Price's concern?
Well, you'll recall specifically that his interest is in the current rate that we charge for a complex, an apartment complex,
Right.
a residential complex. We charge them the same that we would.
Right.
And quite frankly, we've got to sit down and figure out what that impact would be if you were to carve that out, and what impact does that have to the overall system. And that's one of the. It sounds easy that we could just, well,
I don't know
let
when-
them exempt themselves out, but it impacts our program, because our that's a revenue that we use in terms of the overall program.
So we haven't started on that, or?
Well, he's done the cost side of it, which is what it costs us. Then we just have to kind of decide internally, and ultimately as a council, is this a policy, what I'm concerned about is if it leads down the road of maybe we should just get out of the solid waste business altogether. I don't think that's where it's going to lead, but
I don't think so.
but we have to evaluate what the impact would be if we allow apartment complexes to opt out of the program, and what that cost is.
So,
I think the bigger question, or the question I think Joe's asking, I think Tom's trying to respond a little bit to, so what's our next step?
Yes.
And in reality, yeah, Bill's costed some things out, probably not a true cost type of thing, but it's not far off. The realities haven't changed. And, you can reach out and talk to other communities. What do they charge? What are their costs? Columbus can't use them because they subsidize their refuse operation. And, but ultimately you get down to that point, whether it's residential or dumpster, picking up whether it's a residential dumpster or not, this is the fee we have to charge to cover our cost. I think we've done an adequate job of doing that. Our refuse fund isn't flush with cash, and we kind of the way we operate. Could it be cheaper? Well, as Tom indicated, Mr. Price, apparently he sees in his situation. Now, we've had examples in the past where other apartment complexes aren't getting the same numbers that he's getting. So generally, it's a market-driven type of thing. We don't hear too terribly often from some, but it is an interlaced type of issue because you can't just, it's tougher for us to kind of do it and then not do it and do it and not do it. But we've got capital improvements we're talking about making, putting $2 million into a refuse building down at the facility. Sooner than later, we need to make that determination. But how do you go about doing that? And at a staff level, we can kind of look at the implications. Yeah, we can check with other communities, but ultimately, you either go through a formal proposal process to say, we're not sure whether we should be in the business, whether we're cost competitive, or you ultimately use that information, not necessarily to award to a given vendor, but to say, hey, there's cheaper ways of having this service provided to our community, and get out of the business. Let private. There's many cities out there that they don't handle the refuse. It's done by any number of different private contractors. You might have Rumpke and Waste Management, all kind of different entities. Some cities don't do it themselves, but they do control the contracting. So as opposed to allowing it to be a free-for-all where each citizen can pick, almost like soon maybe we'll be able to pick from one of two cable companies. It used to be only one, but they might have the option of going to any number of different refuse services that are willing to operate in the city. So that standard of you have different people putting the trash out at different parts of the city at different times because these private haulers may not all pick up. In my neighborhood on a Wednesday, we may have 4 different haulers out there. We did that in the past. We went through a formal bid process. The only way you can get any decent information is if you bid it out, because otherwise it's all speculative information,
Sure.
what the private sector may charge,
I know,
including
I've
what
been
Mr.
through
Price has
many
indicated.
times.
So you do that, you get that sense, and then you have to make a policy decision. Yeah, we understand this, that, and whatever else, but for the community as a whole, we still think it's better. Several years ago, Joe, you were around when we did it, we reached out, the citizens said, even if it does cost a little bit less,
We still
prefer to have the
I
city
think
doing
that
it.
would probably.
And they ultimately made a policy decision as a council. So how do we go about getting to that point? Because
Well, I guess that's my concern, because we told him we would get him an answer, and I don't want it to sit in limbo. I just wanted, if that be the answer, the city's going to continue on with it, then period. Because I know we as a council had decided to come to this committee and not the Public Works Committee, and I want to make sure that, we do.
Do you
get
want to
back-
set maybe, Joe, a separate,
I thought it would be on the agenda tonight, because we said we'd try to take care of it as soon as possible.
it's probably not a 20-minute discussion at
Oh,
a
no.
finance committee. So maybe that's probably where Tom's getting to. I think if you have a meeting solely to talk about,
I think
and
it's
it
a
might
work
take you a couple
session.
hours, and at least staff can go through what we know about
And
it.
then we can get you the information. I mean,
Well, I guess I wanted a part of the minutes of this meeting there, and we have discussed it. We are going to continue on.
yeah, maybe we set a work session day where we can come with the information,
on
review it,
Yeah.
and
And then.
this
schedule-
committee can provide city council with some guidance as to what you want to do.
I mean, the one important part of that, you said, we're almost gonna go off the bid, we gotta know what it actually.
Yeah, and I don't know, it sounds, there is a lot of work to do this.
Oh, yeah.
And this isn't just a simple, well, we'll just put it out for bid. I think the thing you need to evaluate is if the specific request is the commercial piece, not the
Mhm.
commercial, the multifamily.
Multifamily.
Be somehow given the option of being able to opt out of it, and what that impact would be, we can look at but that's only one piece of it ultimately, so.
Yeah, ultimately, there's a legal side to it because this gets into even issues with the county. we have a monopoly on residential waste, and that's why we're picking up the apartment complexes, because we don't. On the commercial side, businesses can go to whoever. Some of them use the city service, but again, as carving it off, if we say the the residential, not all the residential has to use the city service, we might be throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because it's not our control anymore, because private entities can come in. We no longer can force people to use the city service. And so that legal side of that needs to be contemplated too.
No, we can,
Okay, let's look at it.
you have to get the information.
Well, I think it would be good to get I think sometime in September we should do it, because it gets closer to budget. It just
Yeah.
gets busier and busier, so I'll have Michelle. Is this time generally okay with folks, Chris?
No,
Is it ten, or do you want to do it later?
Early. Yeah.
I mean, later is fine.
Yeah.
Even 6 to 8
Or even 5 might be.
Five's better than.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a haul to get here at times.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
So the impact fees, we're gonna.
Yeah, that's
take a
just,
look at that.
yeah, I'll put that up before city council as
council.
far as a resolution. Glen Road,
Road.
I think I mentioned this before, I think in a previous update, that we're in the process of moving ahead with the design work up to Berlin Station
Berlin
Road.
Station.
And currently, the engineer is doing survey work for that. But in order for them to move ahead with the actual design work, we need to do a supplemental appropriation from the Glen Road Construction Fund to allow us to move ahead with the work.
What are we looking at out there?
It's about it's about a 254, hold on for a second. As usual, it's not inexpensive to do these kinds of things. It's $245,000 for the actual design work and about $82,000 for, if authorized, for about $327,000. It's about
The work, the cost of that would come out of the Glen Road, the TIF fund that we have.
we
I was gonna say,
reallocated those dollars.
It's not gonna come out of any other.
No, this is again, this is
Come out
an
of general
example of,
Matter of putting it one hand, doing it and putting it back in.
you'll recall that we put in place a TIF for a bridge over at Berlin Station Road, which we realized was not going to happen in the foreseeable future. So council authorized the reallocation of those dollars. One of the purposes was for the construction of Glen Road up to Berlin Station Road. And we're in the process now of evaluating we're ready to move ahead with that. And our goal will be to have the road open by the time the second high school opens in 2000.
What do you want us to put in a recommendation?
Well, I just want to make you aware of it as the finance committee. It's a large dollar amount. The only other thing that we've got to discuss, and I want to talk internally with staff and with Dean about it, is just obviously there's a construction component and there's the design component, then there's the right-of-way acquisition component. This would not include the right-of-way acquisition, and that's the other piece. So we might come back to you, or we might get the resolution to indicate that we're authorized to use those dollars for right-of-way. And we've got to acquire the right-of-way to build the road.
What's in that fund now?
Well, one of the things related, I was going to get into that a little bit, even as far as how it might get presented to city council ultimately, is we are collecting an increasing amount. This was a residential tip that was put on those new houses in that general area.
Mhm.
And the last 2 or 3 years, with all the big pickup and new houses being built, it's been beneficial. So prior to this, about 3 years ago, we talked about us trying to project what TIF monies would come in and how far that would go. So we've been pretty conservative. That's why we've held off. We've identified that connection where it stubs to Berlin Station, but there was some logistics working with the county engineer on what form it was going to take. But the resources and what's coming in from that TIF fund are sufficient. Tom talked about the design right away. Construction might be $3-4 million or more, but there's sufficient funds there to pay for that.
Okay.
It
But,
may,
yeah, both of you know I don't like supplementals unless we have money coming in, money
Right.
coming out.
Yeah, this is
and this is one of those, I think we kind of talked about that maybe last year at Capitol, this was looming out there. We didn't know when to appropriate money and then change. So we're at a point now where I think not so much the financial side of this, because we've been in a pretty comfortable zone with that. It's the ducks are lining up with county engineer and what actually we plan to design.
Well, it's been
There
a
were some questions about
topic of conversation with Tom, is when we have our meetings on the levy out there. they want that road built.
Yeah, and this is
And-
clearly a case where new growth is helping pay for this roadways.
And I think the new high school that's proposed out there is another element that
It's gonna
I think
push it.
it's probably better if we do it sooner than later.
Plus, it provides a logical northern outlet there. which is
Okay.
good. So that'll be coming to the council on the 12th.
12th.
Is at least a first reading.
Okay.
And the last one is, this is just to recognize, not to recognize, but we have received donations in for the concept design that was done for the Hayes Memorial you saw, and we need to pay the consulting architect for that, so.
Yeah, I'm on that.
Yeah, I know you're,
I'm on that. And, we passed a hat and several of us contributed money to offset the difference.
and I think the
We
county
came
has
up
put some
short.
money in,
The county's put money in.
What was the city's contribution?
I think $500, Chris.
That's all we put towards that?
Yeah, I think we used, that's what we had discussed with council,
Mhm.
was $500. And that was gonna come from that community promotions fund that we have, that we set
For
up.
the Hayes Memorial, we've only contributed
For
500.
just for the, yes.
No,
That's just for the,
I'm talking for the whole project.
oh no, we haven't done any discussion on that.
The idea with that is, I think, has been that that's gonna be, the money, the hard costs associated with that project would be through fundraising.
Agreed, there's talk out there that, why we, with this road levy, that.
No, and that's-
Put money, into this memorial and.
Well, I think you should state for the record that
Right,
the
yeah.
hard costs are really,
Yeah, it's all
that's up to the
donations.
community to raise
It's
those
just more
dollars.
misinformation. out
Yeah, it
there
is. I
As it
mean,
works with moving Delaware forward.
What they are doing is they're going to try to get a person or persons to head up a committee for fundraising. In fact, we're having a meeting Thursday at 5:30.
Okay.
Bingo.
Yeah.
And they're hoping to generate all that, through.
So hopefully the newspaper will report that no money is,
well,
Well, he's been at the.
As Councilman Jones states,
yeah, there's no money being spent by the city on the project, it's all donations.
right, that's the premise of it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's gotta be
But
raised.
again, there's, talk out there that the city is paying $400,000 for a
No, that's
memorial,
absolutely, no,
which
that's
isn't true.
absolutely not.
No,
And I'll keep an eye on that as long as I'm on that committee.
so if the money's not, it's just gonna take,
It's gonna take
some
longer.
time.
They asked me how long it take to do the Veterans Memorial. It took 2.5 years.
Right.
Yeah, and we're working with the property owner over the design, getting his input, so it's gonna take some time.
You did mention there were some contributions coming in,
Yes.
those flowing through the
Delaware
Foundation.
Foundation.
foundation. I just wanted to make sure, because,
We're,
yeah, we don't, it creates problems when it comes through our books.
No, that's what we try to get to that. And we bring like 6 or 7 of us brought the checks in.
Right.
Gave them to Jackie, and she forwarded them to Marlene in her outfit. That takes care of it.
That's good.
Yeah, we told
I
them
think I
it's nothing through the
communicated
city. And I'm not going to get involved in fundraising as a city employee. I'm a city employee also, but I'm on the committee. The other one was
They're gonna
different.
handle
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
understand that then, gentlemen, what we're doing on that. If you have any concerns, have them call me. I'll discuss it.
Well, all it takes is 1 or 2 comments on Facebook, and
And
then you gotta reply, and then they
you
reply to
get,
the
then
reply.
emails start, and then,
Yeah, Councilman Jones, can you explain?
we'll use that $400,000 you spent on the memorial for the roads.
Yeah.
There isn't $400,000 for the
Where
memorial.
is that? Right.
Just to summarize what's on the agenda here for these upcoming supplementals, the impact fee is coming out of the impact fee fund, so that's not impacting our general fund at all.
Mhm.
Glen Road will come out of that TIF fund, so that's not impacting our general fund. And the RV Hayes would come out, at least our proportionate share, the city's, whatever, say $500 is
Yeah.
coming out of the fund that for the hotel motel tax for the promotion.
Promotion.
Delaware
promotion.
fund, so that's not impacting the general fund either.
No.
Just as a matter of course, only because it's Finance Committee, we have had, and I include that each month with my Finance Director's report, there's probably been 12 or so supplementals this year. The vast majority are similar type of situations. It's not really coming out of our discretionary general fund amounts. There have been a few that were.
14 of them.
Yeah, there were a few that did come out of that fund, but comparative to other years, there's no, on my part, no real concern that we've increased our spending, beyond what was originally intended. So we're still in pretty good shape as it pertains to that.
Very good. Next then is CIP.
Yeah, just,
Everyone got a copy of it at their place. I asked her if they would print out a copy for everyone.
yeah, and we set up, I think, a work session for the meeting
October 3rd.
3rd, and then I will provide an overview on the 12th to council, but there's not a lot of new, initiatives in that proposal.
It was Monday the 3rd, right?
Pardon?
Or that was, you said it was the 3rd?
I think, yeah, it's that
Okay,
date.
yeah.
I think there's a
Not
conflict. One or two people have a conflict, but mostly folks are going to be able to make that work. But I did identify some policy issues with respect to the Entrepreneur Center, what we do with Gazette Building, which we'll be hopefully being able to review with council as part of the work session, as well as downtown parking. Once we get the parking report, the draft circulated, and council's able to talk about it, Ken maybe can expand upon that. That might have some implications more in the longer term than in the short term, but there might be some short term.
Some small stuff, short term.
Yeah, I think that will probably more impact the operations budget than it will the,
At that meeting, Tom, can we get an update on all the facilities we own and how much money we have invested in them and how they're attached? I've been asking
yeah,
for
that,
for a
I
couple,
thought
3 years.
Jackie had,
And I've never have gotten it yet, and I think we need it both for capital improvements and the budgeting.
I have a couple of questions about just about CIP prior to our work session, so
sure.
if I can. So I had it marked here. I don't know if anybody has this document in front of them, but the one page that shows, I don't know, whether it's the equipment was.
One of these days, Dean's gonna number these pages or somebody.
They are numbered.
Well, these are not-
I just-
What's the other one?
Well, you can't number the
Okay, I'm sorry,
first.
page 16, which is the equipment replacement fund. So I guess just my question generally, kind of like under Parks and Rec, pickup trucks or whatever it is, or under the police department, how come that money doesn't come out of any impact fees for like the police impact fee or the Parks and Rec impact fee?
Our impact fees did extend beyond buildings and included major pieces of equipment, but you can only use the impact fees if you're expanding your capacity. So if you're replacing a pickup truck, you couldn't use impact fees.
Okay, so it doesn't.
Generally doesn't apply. If we had, for whatever reason,
If we added another
Fleet.
park.
We had a new park and it requires 2 new mowers.
Trucks or mowers.
Okay.
You could use it for
Okay.
that.
but to do that's kind of tough. You got to make sure you track your fleet. Now, we were able to do it several years ago with our police cruisers because we had at one point 9 frontline police cruisers or whatever it was. And then we increased our fleet to 11 and then to 12. Well, that incremental, that first vehicle, we could use impact, but then when we had to replace that, it was coming out of operations.
Okay, that makes no sense. So then on page 7, under street improvements, does all this go away with passing of the levy,
No,
these dollars?
I think what Dean and I were talking about that actually when we were doing the CIP, and as was Bill, he was looking at presenting, two scenarios. One scenario is if the levy passed and how that money gets segregated. We would continue to utilize our state license fees, our state gas taxes, and
Still for
other
roads.
revenues for roads.
Okay.
This just augments that.
Okay.
Our commitment to the public is that we not reduce the current level of spending for transportation, and that we increase it. And that's really what we're going to have
Right,
to do.
and one of the things, and that's what's being communicated out to the public, and me and Tom met with an individual accountant here, and we were talking about how it's one thing to say that, but how do we? Because in essence, what we're saying is those existing commitments, because right now we're going to continue doing that's most of the road money's allocated to our major arterials. We don't have any money really appropriated to do neighborhood resurfacing. We don't have money there necessarily to do some of these major trips. So we could, at least initially, as we move forward, let's assume for Wiggles the levy passes. I think what you would see for that next ensuing, or we may just amend it. Because again, keep in mind, that's just a plan. We can amend it the first part of the year. I think we'd come back with a plan amendment, but I think until everybody gets their hands around, we'd show that as a separate issue. So we would show that new money coming in, and this would stay the same, because clearly that's what's intended to being done. What those funds will be used for, none of that's in there now. So
And the several meetings I've gone to, Chris, on the levy, that question always comes up too. Are you going to do away with that and concentrate on the levy? And we say, no, that's going to be an ongoing thing.
I guess my question wasn't really about those projects going, about those CIP projects going away, just whether that money would go back to the general fund and then those dollars would be covered by, levy dollars.
No, the intent is, and I think we had that discussion, is that right now, it's easy, the gas tax license fee, that has to be spent on roads.
That has to.
It's that general fund allocation of $1.7 billion. Now, it's not all for roads, some of it goes for other issues, but that'll still continue. And that's what we're going to continue to use for our major arterials, for and different things like that, to really work on that.
Great.
Any more questions on the CIP?
As I said, those are just like,
We just
well,
have
we'll
to
get into the.
nuts and bolts of it on.
Yeah, the full document when we meet on the 3rd. But again, it's laid out in the same way. Someday, if we had a budget analyst, we could present this in a way that we have more information about the different projects, and it's just really tough to get it all pulled together.
Well, let's get the levy passed first, and then we'll get it.
Okay, so that's all I have.
That's all we have on that. Okay. Any more, Dean, on the CIP?
CIP.
Okay. And next then is the 2017 budget.
Not a whole lot to report there.
It has to be out at what time?
November 15th, so we'll start that work right away. I mean, we're starting it now. We've got to get the schedule out to the directors and kind of outline. We'll probably follow the same approach we followed last year. Hopefully we'll have a few less wrinkles in terms of the two, because we had two kind of formats last year, recall, and I know there was some frustration over one format didn't have all the information that the other did, and so.
Does your budget schedule that you usually go into, you go locked down for a couple,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, are you going into that budget with two plans, like a levy passing plan and a levy failing plan?
Not really, Chris, because that's so much of that is more capital.
Okay.
But what I'm
Well, by that
thinking
time,
about is that really, in order for us to follow through on our commitment, if the levy passes, we follow through on our commitment, it is going to require some resources on our end in terms of just getting those projects done. And that's what I've got to figure out. How does that impact the operational budget?
Right.
The other thing to mention, and Ken's aware of this, and I know Lisa is, having sitting on this working group with the BIA, is that we've talked about the capacity issues in terms of plan review, both in the mostly in the engineering department, and talking about the money we now spend on third parties to make those reviews, and whether there needs to be some, instead of hiring third parties, we hire our own staff that we have control over. I know that's come up, and what I've indicated to the committee, and Ken was there last week, was really can't. That's a budgetary issue.
But I'll be prepared to make a pretty strong argument forward to that, given the discussions that we've had.
Right, and so that's one area we are seeing right now. We're not returning to where we were in 2004, 5, and 6, but we're probably at 70%, 80% of where we were with that, with respect to the new builds, the commercial, the industrial activity, and obviously all of that impacts staffing and review times.
What it appears is that it's actually costing us more and taking longer the way we're doing it now than it would if we had staff.
But you've given a negative response out there from developers too, because they said we can go somewhere else and build.
Well, I mean, at least I think they'd like it to be, I think they would be supportive of having an in-house person.
I'll never buy that argument, though.
What's that?
That they'll go someplace else.
No,
they want
no.
to be. They want to be here.
Right.
They wouldn't, be going
Yeah.
through this. So that doesn't hold on.
It's just that review time is.
Oh yeah, I'm trying to understand.
And it's going to cost us if you pay somebody else on to do it.
And they want it, they'll take it to the township or the county versus the city. And, do we want to annex more land? No, I don't think so.
There's a lot of things related to that. I haven't been a part of any of that it's more costly to hire people outside. That,
Sure.
You need to call it something else. It may not be as convenient.
Are you in those meetings?
But a cost side, it's not more costly. We don't oftentimes, our people, it's not that they're bad, but when they hear cost, they say, well, gee, we have to pay $150 an hour. And there's all kind of costs that we bring it on the house that we need to contemplate on top of that.
Right.
One of the things we talked about, if this levy passes, I mean, I think there's a challenge to get these projects done sooner than later. We've got to make sure we don't have our internal people bogging it down. Is there a way that we can move simultaneously on multiple projects? And that becomes a challenge because we still we have to oversee a little bit. So there may be some implications to that. But some of the other things, plan reviews and different things like that's one thing if the quality isn't very good. And that needs to be part of that because there are costs associated with, most people realize that operating a business, when you bring things in-house, it may appear to cost more, but you're not paying that if the work isn't there. We went through some painful times 10, 12 years ago where we had to lay off, get rid of positions. A lot of times it was pretty apparent there because the bottom kind of dropped out. More often than not, it's not. There's that carrying cost when it's not as busy. We don't just let people go. So ultimately, I'm not saying it's not, but we need to take that into context and make sure that it all.
Is this a developer telling us that it's cost us more, or is this something?
No, I think what the developer's saying is it's taking longer.
Taking
and
time,
It is, and I think.
The argument is it's taking longer as it's costing you money, and he's saying.
Well,
that
no,
it's costing us more.
but we're not so sure that it's not costing.
Right, I'm saying,
The
Right, we need
total
to-
cost of what we're
it's coming
paying.
to cost,
The
the
total
total
cost
cost
of what
directly
we're-
part of that process.
We need to be
Define
broader.
costs, because everybody's going to have a different.
Right. And then a part of that becomes the timeline frame too, because and how much oversight you want to have and not that you just turn it loose, but that needs to be taken. Like I said, we talked about that if this levy passes, and we hope it does. The reality of it is it's going to put more demands on our operations, but the levy money is not going to go towards that. As Tom said, that's all going to capital. So if it does pass, part of that deliberation for the 2017 budget is, it's not going to provide any operational money, but operationally, we got to make these projects happen. And so that's going to have some impacts. And
It's going to
so
be a strain on us.
it might have a negative impact on our operating budget, but not anything we can't handle. It's just, we have to make sure we have the right resources.
So that'll be
so that
one
we get
area.
those things to occur.
Yeah, that'll be one area I know that's come up. And there's some others as well in terms of some other areas, but I'll be getting into that more as far as when I present the budget.
From a format standpoint, again, we're going to try to do the same. We'll make sure we deal with, I hate to say this, it sounds confusing, but it's really not. We have a couple different variations of the budget. There's what we call our line item budget, which after it's all adopted, it's what we use to manage our budgets because things are based on line item expenditure accounts. That's the way we have to complete our financial statements and all that sort of stuff. They want to know what type of expenditure is, if it's a capital outlay, if it's a operating supply. We like to provide the information to council. It's based on the outcome, what we're using that money for. Because what does it tell you if we spent $3,635,000 on operating supplies? That doesn't mean anything to you. What did we do? What do we use it for? And so trying to bridge the two together can be the challenge. And it's really engaging department personnel to look at their budgets and allocate their costs based on outcomes or services that they're providing. Worked with Rob. Rob spent a lot of time here in the last couple of months putting together what we hope is a little bit better version for our department heads to engage themselves into pulling together. And we put together some Excel spreadsheets that hopefully can take the typical budgetary information and based on the type of services they provide, allocate that out. But, that's easier said sometimes than done, but we're going to hopefully take that to another level. But so once we do that, then we have what we would refer to as the council version of a budget, which has a lot more information. Hopefully most of it that you focus on in your discussion is on the policy side, the service levels. We'll also give you the line items for those that want that. And then ultimately what we publish out there on the web page becomes another version of that. And it needs to be understood by the citizens.
So the public can look at it and understand.
Yeah, because they don't necessarily always get what council gets because they're not going to be able to figure out what's what. So we're making a little headway. Again, we're somewhat dependent on the departments being able to take that time. When Tom talks about a budget analyst, it's almost as much more so assisting those department heads to help quantify and measure different things. it's not so much an accounting type of thing that we can
Is
do.
this the second or third year now?
This will be the third year that we'll go down this approach.
Yeah.
And,
And I think with the.
That's good.
hopefully-
and again, if you have thoughts, feel free at any point in time to interject, and it'll always be somewhat of a work in process, because it's a different way of looking at how we allocate our resources. The right way, but it's tough to pull off.
Item 7, any more discussion on the budget, gentlemen? Item 7 is other, what other subject matter?
The only thing I was going to add here was if there's any other items that the finance committee has. You had mentioned the refuse.
Yeah, I've been getting a lot of calls on the articles in the paper and the meeting at Shade Tree. On,
the tree trimming?
yeah, well, the city doing the Shade Tree, going to plant trees or not going to plant trees. It's going to be up to the homeowner to maintain them and things of that nature. And
Yeah.
most of them are saying the city should continue to what
Right,
they're
and
doing.
that was the recommendation
On
that
trees.
Ted has, is that we,
Okay.
and I think Shade Tree, is that we continue that. There was just this exception that was made for the Cheshire Crossing
Cheshire Cross.
subdivision
Mhm.
for the HOA, that they would do that, but I think that's going to remain our responsibility.
Continue on.
Yeah.
maybe on. And I know we have, whatever that gas station area gets out there on 23, they're supposed to contribute $100,000 to the Shade Tree
Speedway, right.
Speedway.
The other item I wanted to mention was we will be convening the council, the recreation levy subcommittee, which is the 4 board council members, to give them an update on where we are with our spending. We're reaching really the end of the recreation levy expenditures. All of the major projects have been done with the exception of a couple. We want to review that with the committee, get your input, and hopefully be able to map out a plan. that will
Prioritize them.
Prioritize stuff so that by the end of 2017, we will have completed all of the projects. And so we want to just give you we haven't done an update in a while. We're at the point now where with the splash pad construction having been completed, with the bike path up to Smith Park having been completed, we want to check in with you in terms of where we are with that, and talk about a couple of the projects that were recommended that we've kind of put a hold on right now, because there's been some discussion about whether it makes sense to proceed with those. And so we want to start with the committee that was put in place by council.
Did we schedule that yet, or?
No, we haven't. Just letting you know that that's going to be something that we'll try to get on everybody's calendar here in the next few weeks. It's the 4 wards, you'll recall, we put that in place to provide some oversight in terms of that spending. So that's really what I had under other. I don't know if there was anything else.
Anybody? Chris?
No, sir. I'm good.
Yeah. Dean? Did you have your-
Yeah, I just wanted to make the committee aware, we'll be introducing some legislation to go through some borrowings coming up. We're really working strategically. We actually have a little bit of flexibility to do that, to really look at the markets and when might be the best time to actually sell these bonds. But we're going to try to get introduce the legislation sooner than later. It may be that we adopt a legislation authorizing the issuance of the bonds. We might wait till March to actually sell the debt because of other market condition issues. The purposes of the money that we would be borrowed, the bulk of it is a refunding issue. We issued bonds in 2016 for a number of different projects, including the airport T-hangars and a couple other major projects that we had done at that time. Well, those bonds right now, it's makes sense if we go basically like refinancing your home mortgage. We're going to refinance them. We're going to reissue them. We'll be able to cut our interest rate quite a bit, and over the remaining 15 years payout on these bonds, we'll save in net present value terms a little over $600,000. I gave an example of that to the Airport Commission at their meeting last week. The money we borrowed, about $1.1 million to build those 3 new T-hanger units, and our annual debt service on that is, I think, about $83,000 a year. Over 25 years we were paying that. By refinancing, we'll be able to drop that down to almost $10,000 less per year. So that's pretty positive, and again, that's capturing the interest rates where they're at right now. The other issue that's going to be a part of that is the Station 3 or 4 fire station. And so the timing of that is such, we're still not necessarily have the complete green light. And I think there'll be some discussion at the council level about doing that, moving forward with the design. But I'd like to, if I can, if we get to a confidence level that's going to move forward, whether it's in March or September or whatever, or January or what, there was indications again. The Fed had a meeting on Friday, and they're talking again about bumping up, interest prime rate and whatever else. So strategic wise, I'd kind of like to capture that. We know we're going to do it. It's just a matter of when, and can get a little bit better interest rates perhaps the early part of the year. There were a couple other projects that were part of our capital improvement plan. One is a roof replacement out at the Public Works. I think I don't think they've done it, but I think we're going to move forward on that. And we to spread that over the next 10 years, we'll make it a part of this borrowing. We also have potentially, things have changed a little bit with what they now want to do with that refuse building out there. Again, so that'll require a little bit more discussion from a policy standpoint, but we may want to, because the cost is up higher, maybe something that we may need to finance. Also, we talked a little bit about the Glen Road extension. Now, again, it's not coming out of general fund or whatever. We're just going to do the design work, but I'd like to look at too and want to talk about that at administrative level. If the design is such that it can pretty much be completed, in addition to bid that project out next July or August, it's going to cost a couple $1 million at least. We'd have to finance that. There's spend down provisions. I can't just borrow money and then sit on it for 2 years, 3 years. But if we're in that window, it may make sense strategically to make that a part of an issue too, and perhaps the first part of the year go out and have that money available if and when that project design work gets completed, and then we can move right into issuing contracts and go that route. So you'll see some legislation. I'll try to identify. There's going to be perhaps some different language. Not that you'll notice, it's prepared by a bond attorney, but one of the other things we're considering is doing a private placement bond issue where we won't necessarily go out to the markets. We'll identify up front the buyers of our debt, and it could include banks, could include a local bank, could include Delaware County Bank if they were interested in doing such. But the timing is that those things are pretty attractive. There's a number of financial entities out there that have large sums of cash. I'm not saying Delaware County Bank does, but and they, there's a certain degree maybe of uncertainty what they might be doing, but they might want to park that into some municipal bonds. So we'll explore that from our standpoint. If it gets us a lower interest rate, we'll be willing to consider that. But the language to be adopted will have to have specific language allowing for a private placement. And if we do go down that route, I'll make sure I clearly explain before we would do that, both to the Finance Committee and the City Council.
How many more years do we owe on the municipal court?
On the municipal what?
Court building, the second phase? It should be coming to closure.
It's in the CI. You usually show that. I think when did we do that? Probably another 15 years.
A few years ago.
Yeah, we were taking that out of the police court,
Police
and then the municipal impact fee fund. I don't have my CIP in front of me, but there's a notation in there about when that debt matures.
I can look at it. I'm just concerned because that ought to be coming, if we can get that thing paid off.
Used to have
2032.
2032?
One thing is initially when we did that, we issued notes. We needed to make that for a longer period of time because the cash flow concerns that we only fund it with impact fees, and for a while their impact fees dropped off. But that has a call provision too. If that gets to the point where we are able to, we'll probably go ahead and pay that off.
Yeah, I was thinking about what the balance is on that, if we could do that, get rid of that.
It's $890,000.
Yeah. Okay.
But again, that's an example of we're using impact fees for that. So.
Okay.
One other thing just passing along, it did come up at the airport commission meeting. I think there was an article in the paper. that the hangar, or the airport commission, we talked about hangar rents.
Right.
And if you're somebody on council, but several of us, 2003-ish council, we had a lot of deliberation about whether we were going to take the risk of building 30 new T-hangar units. We had the existing ones that didn't have any outstanding debt. We did the analysis, projected what the money coming in, going out would be, and we were looking at a 25-year period where pretty much all the rent would go to paying, the taxes, because we have to pay property tax. It's a private type of activity, paying back the debt, the $1.1 million we borrowed, plus a small amount for maintenance and whatever else that, it'd be 25 years before we'd have money coming in that wasn't tied to those expenses. And that still looks to be the case. It might stretch out a little bit further to 30 years, but what we talked about with the airport commission, they agreed, and I think they're gonna make a recommendation, or they did, to council, is that we're gonna increase the rent this year by 5%, and then perhaps every 3 years bump it up by 5%.
Beginning of 17.
Okay.
Right, so it'll start in the calendar year 2017, and along with that, it also there'll be a kind of a little bit of a reserve balance in that fund, because it's a separate fund, that if there is some substantial maintenance out there, there'll be close to $100,000 that could get rolled back into before the debt's paid off in 15 years. So there's money there to do that. But just wanted to make you aware that that might be
All the
coming.
hangars are rented now, or do you have?
They
About
pretty much are. I think there's transitional periods between them, but by and large, they have a little bit of a waiting list. There was some discussion about perhaps maybe we need to build more, but there's a lot of policy things tied to that. So
Need to put a restaurant out there before we have any more hangars.
mhm.
yeah.
One that serves wings.
Yeah, bum. Okay, members' comments?
I have none.
Ken? I don't have any. I want to thank you for taking the time at 4 o'clock. I'm open anytime, so I can.
We'll look at that.
My
later.
schedule.
Start time for the work session. And we'll get
Next.
that on the agenda.
Next meeting, we'll just.
I'll have
wait.
Michelle
Make-
get next couple of weeks. Hopefully we can get it scheduled for you guys
Okay.
after Labor Day.
Mhm. Got the brown jug coming up, so we got
Or do it before.
all that. Yeah, do it either before or after. Okay, anything else? Otherwise,
Does anybody want a copy of the CAFR that Rob held up before?
The what?
Our actual financial statements?
If you got one, I'll take one.
Okay, we'll get
Yeah,
some
I hadn't seen it either.
printed up. It's,
Yeah, get me a copy of it.
How many? Just one?
Anybody else?
I'm good.
Sure.
Yeah, they're not hard copies like me. I like to go through them. Okay, entertain a
Got the
motion.
electronic versions out there,
Adjourn.
the auditor's website and from our website.
Second, we're adjourned at, is it 5:35? 5:33. You getting paid by the minute?
I am.
Okay, good.